Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. Let's begin with the keywords that made headlines this week. Driven by robust AI-related demand, Korea's stock market hit a new closing high, with gains in semiconductor and power equipment sectors pushing total market capitalization to a record level. After heightened attention, a South Korean court has delivered its appellate verdict for former President Yoon Suk-yeol in a case centered on obstruction of arrest and abuse of power allegations. South Korea's April parliamentary session has wrapped up with rare bipartisan results, but political attention is now shifting quickly to a high-stakes constitutional reform vote and closely contested local elections just weeks away. President Lee Jae-myung is pushing to broaden Korea's diplomatic reach beyond its traditional partners. Following his trip to India and Vietnam, the president at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday emphasized deeper engagement with the Global South. Our U.S correspondent Song Hee-jin reports.
President Lee Jae-myung has stressed the need to broaden South Korea's diplomatic outreach to the Global South following his recent trip to India and Vietnam.
변화의 물결 속에서 안정적 성장 동력을 확보하려면 특정 지역에 대한 지나친 의존도를 낮추고 우리의 선택지를 꾸준히 늘려가는 전략적이고 유연한 국익 실용 외교가 절실합니다.
Chairing his first cabinet meeting since the trip on Tuesday, President Lee said the war in the Middle East is reshaping the global economic and security landscape and called for a more strategic and flexible diplomatic approach. Tuesday's meeting reviewed the outcomes of Lee's state visits with a particular focus on strengthening economic ties with India.
어쨌든 미국, 유럽, 중국에 편중돼 있는 게 현실인데 인도는 지금 세계에서 제일 인구도 많고 14억 6천인가 7천만이라고. 근데 이게 이제 기업들이 독자적으로 진출하기에 초기에는 부담이 사실은 있는데 이 정부 간 협력이 되게 크게 도움되잖아요.
Lee's summit with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi resulted in an agreement to establish a ministerial-level Korea-India Industrial Cooperation Committee, along with an MOU to support cooperation between the two countries' small and medium-sized enterprises.
In the case of our ministry, one deputy director covers 5 to 6 countries, including India. Despite India's importance, our current institutional capacity remains limited. We need to strengthen our governance framework to reflect India's strategic significance.
At the same time, President Lee underscored the importance of maintaining stable ties with traditional partners. He urged resolving pending issues based on mutual respect and shared principles while building forward-looking relationships. The president didn't mention specific countries, but the remarks come after the U.S. reportedly restricted intelligence sharing with Seoul on North Korea following the unification minister's disclosure of the regime's nuclear facility in Kusong. Song Hee-jin, Arirang News.
A South Korean appellate court has handed down its decision in the case involving former President Yoon Suk-yeol on charges including obstruction of arrest. Our correspondent An Sung-jin tells us more.
7 years. A special appellate panel at the Seoul High Court dedicated to insurrection-related cases sentenced former President Yoon Suk-yeol to 7 years for obstructing his own arrest and related charges on Wednesday afternoon.
The defendant is hereby sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment.
This is more than the first ruling, which was 5 years, but less than what prosecutors had appealed for, which was 10 years. Yoon's defense team stated that they will be appealing. The appellate ruling for Yoon, which began at 3 p.m., was live-streamed, and the verdict was handed down at around 4 p.m. The court cited a range of factors in making the decision: violation of the Presidential Security Act for ordering the deletion of secure phone records, obstruction of martial law declaration documents, abuse of power, and special obstruction of public officials and execution of duties during Yoon's first attempt to block arrest. This marks the first appellate decision tied to allegations surrounding the December 3rd martial law declaration and the inaugural case handled by the court's insurrection-focused division. Former President Yoon Suk-yeol faced multiple charges, including allegedly mobilizing the Presidential Security Service to obstruct the execution of an arrest warrant by the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. He's also accused of convening a flawed meeting ahead of declaring the emergency martial law and drafting the martial law proclamation, destroying it, and ordering the deletion of secure phone call records. In the initial trial held in January, the court sentenced him to 5 years in prison, which the prosecutors from the special counsel appealed, arguing it was too lenient, leading to this appeal. Meanwhile, in a separate case on charges of leading an insurrection, Yoon was sentenced to life imprisonment in February, with the appellate trial currently underway. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The National Assembly's extraordinary session for April ended on Tuesday after a rare burst of bipartisan lawmaking, despite weeks of intense political confrontation. And tension is quickly shifting to a constitutional reform vote next month and the fast approaching June 3rd local elections. For more on what got achieved in April and what could dominate politics in May, we're joined by our political correspondent, Moon Hae-ryun. Welcome, Hae-ryun.
It's good to be here, Sujin.
Hae-ryun, so despite the political gridlock, lawmakers were able to see tangible results in April. So what stands out the most?
Yes, that's right. So even in a highly polarized environment leading up to the June local elections, the National Assembly did manage to pass measures with immediate real-world impact. The biggest was a supplementary budget worth 26.2 trillion won, designed to cushion households and businesses from the economic shock of high inflation and elevated energy prices linked to Middle East instability. The package includes direct relief payments for lower-income households, with the first round of applications and payouts already underway. The package also includes support for fuel costs, public transportation discounts through the K-Pass program, and supply chain stabilization measures for key industrial materials like naphtha.
Well, that does sound quite promising. And now that the April session is over, what's next for the upcoming May extraordinary session?
So attention is rapidly shifting to a major constitutional reform vote in early May, potentially one of the most significant in nearly 4 decades. The proposed amendment would be the first revision to South Korea's constitution since 1987. It includes symbolic and substantive changes, formally recognizing the democratic legacy of the May 18th Gwangju democratization movement, strengthening assembly control over martial law declarations, and adding the state's responsibility for balanced regional development. Speaker Wu says the package reflects a broad public consensus and has urged main opposition People Power Party lawmakers to be allowed a free vote rather than being bound by party opposition.
This reform would open the door to revising an outdated constitution and moving the country forward. If it fails now, the next chance may not come for some time. Please make every effort to ensure it reaches a plenary vote.
And that matters because passage requires a 2/3 majority of the 295-seat assembly, meaning at least 197 votes. Reform supporters currently have 187 signatories, so they would need defections or cross-party support from the Conservatives. The PPP, however, has raised suspicions that broader reform efforts could eventually be used to reopen debate over presidential term limits, although supporters note that the current constitution explicitly bars any extension of the sitting president's term through amendments.
And looking beyond Parliament, I want to just touch on the local elections since they're just a couple weeks away. So how are the parties looking?
So both parties are currently in the final candidate selection process leading up to the official campaigning period, but they're doing so from very different positions. The ruling Democratic Party has finalized its nominations across all metropolitan and provincial contests, while the People Power Party has yet to settle on a candidate for the Gyeonggi-do province governor. With its slate in place, the DP has shifted focus to campaigning, centering its message on budget relief measures and regional development promises, hoping to frame the local races as a referendum on the new administration's momentum and delivery. The party believes it now has a genuine opening even in several traditionally conservative regions. The People Power Party, meanwhile, is contending with internal turbulence. Its leader faces mounting criticism from within the party over both its leadership and campaign strategy, leaving questions about how unified a front the PPP can present as election day approaches. Several races in cities such as Busan and Daegu are expected to test whether long-standing regional voting patterns are beginning to shift. So while April was about passing legislation, May and early June now look set to be about political survival, constitutional reform, and control of local power.
So it looks like it will be a crucial few weeks ahead. So thank you so much for coming in today, Hae-ryun.
Thank you for having me.
Continued rising tensions over Kupang are drawing attention as they intersect with broader discussions between Korea and the United States with potential implications for ongoing security talks. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Seung has more.
Korea and the United States should focus on building a future nuclear and high-tech partnership, overcoming commercial sticking points in their bilateral relations. That's according to Henry Haggard, a former U.S. State Department official, now a senior advisor at West Exec Advisors. He spoke with Arirang News amid concerns in Seoul that corporate disputes are affecting sensitive security talks, after more than 50 U.S. lawmakers in Washington raised concerns over regulatory treatment of U.S.-linked firms including Coupang. Seoul and Washington's joint bilateral fact sheet last year was expected to pave the way for discussions on advancing cooperation in nuclear power submarines, as well as fuel processing and enrichment under the existing civil nuclear framework. However, talks have been stalled for at least 2 months this year, despite the strategic interest for both sides. As Washington calls on its allies to build their own capabilities and invest in U.S. industries, Korea is ready to be a key partner with a $350 billion investment framework and the industrial base to support U.S. shipbuilding and nuclear supply chains.
So this unlocks a new level of cooperation. It allows and it encourages and works towards less reliance on Russia. I think there's also a significant knock-on effect into the civil nuclear space. Just the fact that we're working more on all things nuclear, I think will also build the natural conversation towards more cooperation on small modular reactors, on traditional reactors, in a space that again represents, over $1 trillion of market over the next 25 years.
National Security Advisor Ri Sung-lak has acknowledged that the Coupang case is affecting the atmosphere of Korea-US consultations and stressed the two issues must remain separate. He said the alliance requires constant management, describing it as a garden that needs ongoing care. Haggard said commercial disputes have risen time and time again, but are simply part of growing pains.
It's not just about the security relationship, it's also this technological relationship and this very advanced relationship. That's where we should be heading. To do that, we have to find a way to manage Korea's regulatory evolution, and the U.S. has to understand how Korea works such that they can match that pace and that evolution and profit from it. Really, I mean, it's a win-win.
Amid concerns, Haggard expressed confidence that the alliance itself is not being undermined and remains on course towards a more strategic partnership. Oh Seung, Arirang News.
Korean stocks closed at a record high on Monday, fueled by an AI-driven surge in semiconductor and power equipment shares, pushing total market capitalization past the 6 quadrillion Korean won mark for the first time. Our Park Jin-an reports.
The total market cap of Korean stock markets for the first time surpassed 6,000 trillion won, or around $4.08 trillion US dollars. On Monday, the Kospi closed at 6,615 points, its highest ever close, pushing the combined market cap to 6,104.7 trillion won. The Kospi accounted for 5,421.55 trillion won, the tech-heavy Kosdaq contributed 679.54 trillion won, and the small and medium-sized enterprise Konex market accounted for 3.59 trillion won. There has been an overall remarkable upward trend over the last year, with some major drops and rebounds. The 4,000 trillion won mark was crossed on the very first trading day of the new year. 5,000 trillion won was breached by February 3rd. While the outbreak of the war in the Middle East briefly pushed it back down under 5,000 trillion, markets have since shown a powerful recovery, adding more than 1,300 trillion in market cap in April alone. The Kospi has now risen more than 30% in April, over 53% this year alone, and 158% year-on-year. The primary driver has been the semiconductor sector, with Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix together accounting for a significant portion of the Kospi's total weight. Their record-breaking first quarter earnings have reinforced expectations that the AI-driven memory supercycle is very much alive, drawing sustained inflows from both foreign and institutional investors. Beyond chips, semiconductor equipment, materials stock, and biotech shares contributed meaningfully to Kosdaq's advance. Looking ahead, global markets will be watching closely this week, As the Fed's FOMC meeting on Wednesday, it's expected to hold rates steady, with the accompanying narrative likely to be key. Attention will then turn to first quarter U.S. GDP data on Thursday. This week, we'll also see major U.S. big tech companies like Microsoft and Apple report their earnings. If U.S. tech giants deliver strong results and AI-driven momentum continues, it could provide another leg up for Korean markets. Park Junan, Arirang News.
As soaring oil prices ripple through everyday costs, many are feeling the strain at the checkout counter. Now, the government is stepping in with a new round of cash support aimed at easing the burden and jump-starting local spending. Our Kim Jin-young was on site to find out more.
The government's so-called high oil price relief fund come at a critical time. It's especially helpful for the initial group of recipients, which includes vulnerable people, many of them elderly.
I came to the community center to receive the payment. Prices are just too high these days, so it really helps, especially for daily expenses like groceries. It will cut my spending by almost half.
I receive basic welfare support regularly, but even with that, I have to be very careful with my spending. But with this additional payment, I can afford to visit the hospital and buy an extra side dish. It really helps with daily life.
Across the nearby shopping area, stores have started putting up stickers one by one, showing they accept the support payments. The latest cash assistance can only be used at small businesses with annual sales below $2 million. Here at this traditional market, merchants are already hoping for more customers from the first day.
Since the Middle East war began, the number of customers at my store has dropped by about 20 to 30% as people are holding back on spending. But once they receive this money, they may be more willing to spend again.
There was a time before when the government provided support payments, and it really helped. I'm hoping this will bring in more customers and help me run my business just like last time.
In past economic downturns, such as during the COVID-19 pandemic, the government provided financial support, often with a focus on the more vulnerable. The latest relief package follows a similar pattern.
Efforts to provide stronger support for vulnerable groups are generally welcomed. They could also help lift spending, even if only modestly, among those facing temporary difficulties.
With uncertainty still surrounding the Middle East conflict, attention is now on whether the support can help revive frozen consumer spending. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
The United Arab Emirates has announced it will leave OPEC, marking a major shift for the oil cartel and raising questions about its future influence over global energy markets.
The United Arab Emirates, one of the world's largest oil suppliers, has decided to leave the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC. As of February, the UAE was the group's third largest producer behind Saudi Arabia and Iraq, pumping around 3.6 million barrels of oil per day, roughly 12% of the organization's total output. Its departure is categorically different from previous exits when Qatar left in 2019, Ecuador in 2020, and Angola in 2024. While the previous exit's impact was limited, this time it is not. The UAE has the capacity to produce up to 4.8 million barrels per day and has plans to expand that to 5 million by 2027. But OPEC's quota system limited its output to about 3 to 3.5 million, leaving a lot of potential revenue untapped as it supported Saudi Arabia's strategy of keeping prices high. With no resolution in sight, Abu Dhabi chose the country's long-term strategic and economic vision over OPEC's. According to the BBC, OPEC once controlled 85% of global oil trade in the 1970s, but that figure has fallen to around 50% today. This means the group still holds leverage but no longer has a monopoly. Losing the flexibility to control oil supply will eventually weaken OPEC's ability to respond to price shocks going forward. While other OPEC members are not yet showing signs of following suit, tensions are rising inside the group over Saudi Arabia's dominant decision-making. In the short term, the ongoing disruption in the Strait of Hormuz limits any immediate market impact. However, once stability returns, the UAE's ability to ramp up production freely could put downward pressure on oil prices and further erode OPEC's leverage in a world increasingly turning toward alternative energy sources. 박준환, Arirang News.
On the cultural front, secondhand shopping is no longer a niche. It's becoming a mainstream way to consume in Korea. And nowhere is that shift more visible than at Dongmyo flea market, now a bustling hub for bargain hunters and trend seekers alike. Our Tong Hee-rim takes us there.
Entering Dongmyo flea market in central Seoul, the atmosphere stands out. Vendors sell a wide range of goods, from vintage watches to used electronics. But the biggest draw is piles of secondhand clothing. Shoppers dig through them for shirts, trousers, and jackets, usually priced between 2,000 and 5,000 won, about $2 per item. This place was once considered an affordable clothing market for older generations, but the demographic has noticeably shifted in recent years.
I came here to relax after my school exams. I like the old vintage and retro vibe, and I'm hoping to buy a designer jacket today.
I heard Dongmyo is famous for its vintage items, so I came looking for some bracelets and rings.
For young people, Dongmyo has become more than just a place to shop. Spurred by social media posts and visits from K-pop stars, the area has evolved into a cultural landmark for experience consumption, the act of digging for your own personal finds.
My friends recommend this place. It's very cool. We bought a suitcase, a clothes, and a cap.
But the hunting for ground-level bargains isn't the only reason people come here.
Dongmyo not only has a variety of clothing, but is also famous for pieces that are timeless, such as limited edition brand clothes. And many shoppers come here to add these to their fashion collection.
This expanding multi-generational customer base is bringing a fresh wave of economic vitality to the local merchants.
We see teenagers as young as 15 to people in their early 20s as customers these days. But there are still many older folks, so people of all ages really come here. Sales were solid, but have increased since the weather has become warmer.
With its unique blend of history and modern fashion trends, Dongmyo continues to solidify its position as the center of South Korea's growing vintage market. Tong Hee-rim, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of Weekly News Highlights. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your weekend.